Hello, this is Mike France with Team Crocodoke, and we made Election 2020 Descent into Chaos. We started with the Liberty or Death game system and repurposed it into our version. We started with the design goal of trying to use as many of the pieces as possible. We felt that was the best way to meet what we felt was the primary challenge of reusing an existing game and repurposing as much as we could into something new. Our game premise is it's Election Day 2020. Joe Biden has presumably won, but Trump is not conceding and is contesting that election victory. The battle will take place within the courts as well as for popular support. Kind of game board changes that we've made. We've added, essentially taken out some of the things that were a little more relevant to the AMREV period. One of the big changes that we've made just from the premise is the cities are essentially where the court battles are going to take place, whereas the states are where the popular support is being fought for. So each of the city locations is a decisive court battle that's going to take place, and a kind of a parallel track is the fight for basically the hearts and minds of the people within the states. So we've added, Miami. We've replaced Norfolk with Washington D.C. There's a media region up here, which kind of functions independently. Cleveland obviously has replaced kind of the generic Northwest. We've replaced and made a modification slightly to the sequence of play. I think it might make sense to go there first. We don't have special actions. What we've done is we've essentially given each faction a menu of just actions, and when you can select 2 actions or 1 action, and similar to a lot of the coins, an action lets you act in multiple locations, and then there's a limited action as a following to the single action choice that instead of multiple places, you can only play into 1. The deck works very similarly to what I understand most of the coins do. There's the current event card, and then a 1 on deck that has been revealed so people can see what comes up. The deck has been stacked. We have the court battle resolution cards seated within the deck so that they come up periodically and drive essentially the overall kind of narrative of the game, building up for those court battles, resolving them, moving on to the next set. Kind of just go over the pieces and their general function. Well, let's just first of all the factions. We have essentially there's 2 on the left, 2 on the right. The left are the Democrats and the progressives. The progressives being the more extreme branch of the left, and on the right we have the Republicans, which are the moderate faction, and then the agitators, which are the more extreme branch of the right. So the pieces, the progressives are the white, and the white pieces are essentially protests. They are the extension of that progressive movement trying to win the hearts and minds of the people through protesting. The tan pieces, the tan cylinders, are the militia. Those are the agitator pieces, and those are countering. They're essentially the right's analog to the protests. They are placed in order to reduce the effectiveness of the protests, essentially. The red and the blue are, color-coded to GOP and Democrats, and those are the influence that's being played primarily into the cities to affect the court decisions. It's a reflection of essentially operatives of the party trying to influence those decisions and playing those behind the scene games. The star are basically court battles that have been resolved in a particular direction. In this case, DC has already been resolved for the Democrats, contributing the victory points associated with DC, which would be 2 towards victory on the Democratic side. I guess it's a good point to go through just the victory conditions. The principal victory condition is winning enough court battles to get your candidate into the White House. That basically determines who wins versus the left or the right. In order to determine that finer grained, which faction within each side wins, well, that comes down to the popular support. For example, if the progressives through their protest movements have raised enough popular support for their movement, then Biden will be essentially beholden to the progressives and have to enact a progressive agenda. So that's how they win versus kind of the moderate Democrats who would rather not have to be enacting that agenda. So I want to go through the kind of the actions available just to kind of give a feel for how each of the faction plays. The progressives, essentially, they're placing the protests. They're going to be placing them out there in order to gather support. They can essentially disorder is their nemesis, and the police, as well as the just the militia. They're also, just to gather that support, they ultimately have to move these regions towards what we are calling opposition side for them. Just the thematic blue versus the red, which is in the game. Opposition basically to the establishment. The Republicans do hold the power right now. The Democrats, they're primarily placing the political pieces, the influence into the cities. They are also trying to maintain order, trying not to let the protests get too far out of control, too much popular support, in which case, again, they would be beholden. They can leverage the popular support and those protests in order to place additional popular support into these areas to influence court decision. So in that way, they're kind of leveraging the effects of what's happening with the progressives in order to increase their political power. So there's a little bit of symbiosis going on. The Republicans and the agitators work somewhat similarly. The main difference is that they're really, the agitators are not drumming up popular support. That using popular support to influence the court decisions isn't really a tool that the right have. They have different tools, and that's primarily disorder and the police. The main moderate party, the Republicans, can place police in order to, essentially, that's how they exert their will onto the main board. Other avenues other than just the straight political influence. The media is also sort of an all-encompassing modifier and a way for, the right essentially has an advantage within the media, and it's important for them to leverage that. Running out of time here, I wanted to touch on, there's some key event cards that play out throughout the game. The things like Trump steps down, which can dramatically change the resource costs and the ability of the moderates to control the agitators. A leader can step up for the progressives, in which case the control of the Democratic Party over that progressive wing decreases, and it becomes more difficult for them. Some spice that we have in the game to sort of change the dynamics kind of mid-game. Running out of time here, so thank you. I had to go through that very quickly. Please take a look at the tabletop simulator to see a better view of the graphics. I tried to put together the mock-ups, but it looks much nicer on tabletop. Thank you.